Dobro večer, gledate N1 intervju, ja sam Ika Ferrer-Gotić. Gost N1 televizije je jedna od ključnih figura međunarodne politike u Bosni i Hercegovini. O ovom ekskluzivnom intervju istražit ćemo kako su odluke međunarodnih sila, posebno američke diplomacije, uticale upravo na ovu zemlju od potpisivanja Dejtonskog sporazuma do današnjih izazova, ali svakako i budućih perspektiva. Bosna i Hercegovina već decenijama stoji potpuno u središtu pažnje međunarodne zajednice. Njen politički pejzaž oblikovali su upravo strani akteri. Otvoreno večeras o brojnim temama. Ambasador Sjedinjenih Američkih Država u našoj zemlji, Michael Murphy, naš je večerašnji gost. Your Excellency, Mr. Ambassador, welcome to N1 and thank you for joining.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be here.
How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you very much.
Busy, in a good mood.
I'm in a good mood, but because we're busy, we're trying to get things done. That's what we're here to do.
I have to say you have been one of the most vocal ambassadors, American ambassadors in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Is that something that you are as a person, or is this something that you wanted to do when you took that position here in this country?
Well, you know, my responsibility, to the best of my ability, the policies of the United States of America. And with regards to Bosnia and Herzegovina, they're very clear, and I enunciate them all the time. We support the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we want to see the country integrated into Euro-Atlantic institutions. And I made clear from the moment I arrived, including in my private conversations with political leaders and others, that the United States is going to speak up about its policies, why we have these policies, why they're important to the United States, and why we're pursuing them. And that we were also going to speak up when we saw actions, whether they're anti-Dayton actions or corruption or attempts to undermine or destabilize the state. We were going to speak up about that and be very clear about our concerns about that behavior, and we were going to be critical of that behavior. And that's what my job is, and that's what I'm going to do.
You took it very seriously, and you made quite some enemies on your journey, if we can say that, but we're going to talk about that, of course. I would like to dig in. There's, of course, a broad spectrum of topics that we have to cover tonight,
okay.
But I would like to dig into one of the most burning topics in the country right now is Southern interconnection.
Okay.
And as the debate intensifies about Southern interconnection as an opportunity for Bosnia and Herzegovina to be independent when it comes to energy, you've been very vocal there too. Now, political obstructions have been happening in the past couple of months, years even, but especially in the past couple of weeks. You have been vocal about it too. Now, you have expressed exactly the strong support for Southern interconnection, and you said also that this is support. It disregards, well, some of the actors, political actors in Bosnia and Herzegovina, like Dragan Čović, says that it disregards the interest of certain constituent people in Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you comment on that? Where do you stand on that? Where does the U.S. Embassy stand on this question?
Well, let me start with a fundamental premise. We have a lot of friends and allies and partners around the world. Bosnia and Herzegovina is one of them. We've learned that exposure to Russian blackmail via their capacity to control energy supplies is bad. And we know that they use their control of gas and other energy supplies to politically bribe or economically intimidate countries. We don't want to see that for our friends and partners. We don't want to see that for Bosnia and Herzegovina. And Bosnia and Herzegovina doesn't want its political independence or its economy compromised by a malign power either. That's the priority purpose from our perspective to the Southern interconnection. But it has other benefits that are really important to the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina beyond those security benefits. It will create jobs, not just with the construction of the pipeline, though it certainly will do that, but it'll create additional opportunities for businesses once they know they have a secure, reliable source of energy to plan, to grow, and to create economic growth in communities that we know need it. And we support it for that reason as well. We have been very clear and very vocal about the obstruction of that pipeline by Dragan Čović. Mm-hmm. Mr. Čović claims he is concerned about the Croats living in Herzegovina, but his behavior suggests otherwise. He's looking for a company that he can control for his own personal, political, and economic benefit, to reward friends, to punish enemies. And in doing so, he's blockading the project. If he hadn't done that 3 years ago, for example, we'd already be 3 years into implementation, 3 years into the benefits of the pipeline project, 3 years closer to Bosnia and Herzegovina being independent from reliance on Russian gas. That's the outcome we want to get to. The only thing I can say is that the country that has benefited from his action is Russia.
Have you spoken to Mr. Čović about
Many
this?
times.
And how do those conversations go? Where do they take place? What did he tell you? Did you voice your concerns? Is there any agreement in sight that this could move forward? As you said, 3 years, we are 3 years behind on this.
Well, we've been working on this issue, as you know, for many years. It goes back to 2020. We have international experts funded by our USAID program, who worked with the then Federation government, including HDZ-BIH and SDA, which were in power at the time, to design a Southern Interconnection Framework Law that would allow the project to move forward. That work was supported by HDZ-BIH in the Federation government. It was supported by HDZ-BIH in the Federation Parliament on 3 separate votes. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Čović interjects and says, nope, we're not going to do this. It's not good for Croats. Now, I don't understand how something that's bad for Croats could have received unanimous support from HDZ-BIH in the Federation government and in the Federation Parliament. And of course, they were involved in drafting the very legislation Mr. Čović is now objecting to.
So you think it's definitely personal interest
Sure.
of Mr. Čović?
Yes, I mean, his party was for it, right? They support it. We've had conversations with officials in HDZ-BIH. They see the benefits of the law. They understand its importance for BIH's energy security. They understand its importance to the communities of Herzegovina, the Croats, the Bosniaks, the Serbs, and the other citizens who live there, and they want to see it get done. But Mr. Čović has another interest in mind. It's his own. And I'm sorry, we support the concept of constituent peoples as outlined in Dayton. We understand the importance of vital national interests, but Dayton doesn't provide for vital Čović interests. Those are different things. And
it's important to recognize those things, isn't it?
Well, one of the mistakes that a lot of people make is failing to distinguish between the individual party leader, the party itself, and their constituents. You know, I've said this once before. Bosniaks are not SDA. SDA is not Bakir Izetbegović. But Serbs are not SNSD, or SNSD is not Milorad Dodik. It's the same with Croats. They're not HDZ-BIH, and they're not HDZ-BIH is not Dragan Čović.
Although he's perceived like that.
He presents himself that way. He presents himself that way. The other leaders do too. They want to be avatars of these people, and what they then do is they use ethno-nationalist sentiment to mask their own pursuit of narrow personal, political, and financial interests. And it's been terribly destructive to the economy and the politics of this country. And the outcome of all of this is that these individuals, Mr. Čović in this case, get fabulously wealthy, and the people he represents continue to have difficulties making a living, finding jobs, finding a future for themselves.
Making ends meet.
That's why people are leaving the country, right? They don't have economic opportunity. And the political leaders who have been in charge of many of these institutions at the state, the federation, the cantonal, or the municipal levels haven't produced results because the party leaders are in this for themselves, not in this for the people.
Russian embassy has responded to this as well, and directly said to the US embassy and to you, well, you will see who was right eventually, trying to, of course, keep the monopoly when it comes to gas, it comes to energy in Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you respond to that?
Obviously, the Russian embassy is adept at spreading disinformation and using its malign influence. This is no different. The Russians have used energy as a weapon repeatedly in Europe and elsewhere. Their bad record speaks for itself.
That was a very short, a very precise answer from on your end. All right, Ms. Ambassador, let's move to other topics as well now. Bosnia and Herzegovina has long been a focal point of international news and the community and diplomacy and engagement, and U.S. diplomacy has had quite an impact on creating laws as well in this country since the Dayton Agreement, of course. And I would like to see your perspective. How has the international community, especially U.S. diplomacy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, shaped the landscape, political landscape of this country?
Well, sure. Let me start with something I think is really fundamental. The Dayton Peace Agreement was critical to ending the violence and the terrible slaughter that occurred in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It wasn't perfect, but it's easy to forget 30 years on how important it was, what an imperative it was at the time to accomplish that. Now, from the beginning, Dayton was always intended as a foundation upon which we could build. It says that in the Dayton Constitution. It explicitly calls on the parties to build on the Dayton structure to strengthen the state, make it more effective, more efficient in serving the people and their interests. Now, second thing I'd like to say, we recognize, as I said, Dayton is flawed. We've never said it was perfect. And the United States has probably been, over the last 30 years, the most active partner to Bosnia and Herzegovina, the most active proponent of trying to make changes to the Dayton Peace Agreement to improve it, to improve its functionality, to improve its efficiency, to address ECHR rulings, for example. The most prominent example of that is the April package from 2006. Now, that wasn't perfect either, but had that April package been adopted, BIH would be in a very different place today than it is now. I would guess, or I would posit rather, that you might be on the cusp of EU membership as opposed to on the cusp of EU negotiations. Mm-hmm. And I think with hindsight, it's pretty clear that the politicians at the time who demagogued that package, who held out the hope of the perfect as opposed to the practical and the improvements that the April package offered, really made a terrible mistake and set BIH back and kind of missed one of the most important opportunities for reform in the country's post-war history. The last point I want to make is about local ownership. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the United States supports local ownership as a concept. We want to see political leaders taking responsibility for improving the lives of the people here, for reforming things like the economy, for improving the rule of law. And the international community made a decision after the April package failed, after the EU gave up on police reform, that the EU perspective and local ownership were sufficient mm-hmm. to propel change in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We were wrong. What happened was, instead of using that opportunity to implement the reforms, to take the steps that I just outlined mm-hmm, to you, mm-hmm. what we saw is local leaders decided to rob the government coffers, to seek to further divide the country.
Not take the responsibility, as you said.
Precisely. They use local ownership as a tool to enrich themselves and to further divide the country. What that means is, as long as they're behaving in that way, as long as local ownership means, to put it in two words, destructive behavior and corruption, then you're going to have an outsized role for the international community in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's unavoidable.
This is exactly what is happening.
Yes.
And you're mentioning Dayton Agreement, of course. It was a transitional solution at the time, and we see it decades later, and we are still stuck on it. Do you think that Bosnia and Herzegovina has a future where Dayton Agreement will be a matter of the past with something new that citizens will take as, oh, this is our own. This is the reason why I should stay in my country. This is the reason why I'll have a job. I'll have a better living standard as well. There's obviously a lot of division in this country, and it always comes down to the Dayton Agreement. Do you think Bosnia has that future?
Well, I would make a couple observations. I think it's important to remember that the Dayton Agreement didn't cause divisions in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It reflected those divisions, tragic as they were. As I said, that's not to claim the Dayton Agreement is perfect, it's not. Now, as far as to whether or not there has to be changes to the Dayton Agreement for Bosnia to move forward, the answer is clearly yes. The European Union has made quite clear that there has to be implementation, for example, of the ECHR rulings, something the United States strongly supports. But what you haven't had is the political will among the political leaders to make the changes necessary in the Dayton Constitution to implement those rulings. I would like there to be the political will there to do that. The United States has indicated it's prepared to facilitate changes to the Dayton Constitution. We've tried several times in the past, and we've always stumbled on politicians' approach to the issue in very narrow ethno-nationalist terms, an unwillingness to make the compromises necessary to advance the country's Euro-Atlantic aspirations. That is what fundamentally needs to change here.
So the current political setup, as we can call it that, what would be then the alternative in order to achieve that?
Well, look, the best possible alternative right now would be for the leaders of this country, the political leaders of this country, to take the decisions they need to change all of the things we've been discussing. So what does that mean? It means taking steps to enhance and strengthen the country's democracy. It means taking steps to strengthen the rule of law and to combat corruption, which is horrible in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It means implementing the reforms required to create a climate for robust private sector-led economic growth, which is the route to prosperity for everyone here. It means passing the reforms that are required for Euro-Atlantic integration. They haven't chosen to do that, but that's the way ahead, and that's what needs to change. My country, my government, is engaged in working on all of those issues. I mean, I say this all the time, but every time we get up and go to work at the embassy, those core goals that I defined, including the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of BIH, but especially the integration of the country into Euro-Atlantic institutions, that's what we work on. That's what my team does. That's what the United States government's policy is. We'll keep doing it. It would be much easier, of course, if the politicians, instead of just saying they care about these things, actually acted like they cared about these things.
Sanctions. Let's go over to sanctions. This is something that your mandate is coming to an end slowly, and you have imposed quite some sanctions on political leaders, businessmen, public figures in Bosnia and Herzegovina, again, made quite some enemies in this country. Of course, sanctions are a powerful tool in international diplomacy in every case, but it also comes with a lot of challenges and complexities. As someone who deeply involved in shaping the U.S. The policy in Bosnia and Herzegovina, we'd love to hear your perspective on the sanctions now, so many years later, especially when it comes to relationship between Your Excellency and Mr. Milorad Dodik, and that relationship is marked by tensions between you two. How do you reflect on the sanctions that have been imposed on political figures, businessmen, public figures as well? And do you think that sanctions really do have the strategy to make them act in a certain way? Because we haven't seen that yet.
Well, look, I have a few observations. First off, you know, I stated at the beginning of the interview what our policies are here. We support the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of BIH and its integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions. And I said also that we've made clear that we're going to speak up to defend those policies. We're going to work hard through some of the programs that I described just a minute ago to advance those objectives. But we're also going to act to hold individuals accountable who are engaged in anti-Dayton actions, corruption, or other acts that threaten the territorial integrity or stability of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I have worked very hard, that's correct, to make sure there is clear enunciations of that policy and clear and rapid actions in response to leaders whose behavior we need to address. We want to hold individuals accountable. I think that's important. None of this is personal. right? This doesn't.
They do take it personally.
Well, they may take it personally, but I don't take it personally. My job isn't to come here and make friends with a particular person, a particular party leader, a particular anybody. My job is to advance the interests of the United States of America, those that I just outlined. Now, I'm lucky, right? Because when I'm asked to get up and go to work every morning and to support the country's integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions, that involves helping to strengthen your country's democracy, helping tackle corruption, helping improve the economy. The people want those changes. The people of this country, the citizens of this country, whether they're Bosniak, Croat, Serb, or other, those are the interests my government and I work to every day. Now, you know, Mr. Dodik, I'm sorry to say this, it behaves like a bully. And bullies always want one more thing. And if you make a concession to a bully, he's going to come back for more. Whether the international community wants to recognize it or not, Mr. Dodik is engaged in a confrontation with it and has been for a long time. And if I can use a metaphor, it's the height of foolishness to pretend that everything's okay if you are metaphorically being punched in the face by a bully. You need to respond, and that's what we've done.
You have responded many times. Do you believe that the citizens are not informed enough how sanctions against, for example, just one example, Mr. Milorad Dodik, affects them, and how it affects their lives, how it affects attracting foreign investments, for example, getting Bosnia and Herzegovina on a gray list, on a black list. Do you think that the citizens should know better when it comes to sanctions and the implications that it has on their lives?
When I arrived here, a lot of the politicians who had been sanctioned, and this included Mr. Dodik, who was sanctioned in the first Trump administration, used to make fun of our sanctions. Right? Oh, we don't mind being sanctioned. They used to call it an honor. We've changed that. They don't laugh anymore. They don't joke anymore. Now the politicians who are sanctioned lament the consequences of those sanctions. They say it's so unfair. Look, that tells me the sanctions are having an impact. It takes time. It takes persistence. It takes determination to change behaviors. I'm not going to tell you that it happens in one snap of my fingers just like that. But it's making a difference and it's having an impact because the people who are sanctioned are telling us publicly that it's having an impact. And we're going to continue to use all of the tools at our disposal, including sanctions, to hold people accountable for anti-Dayton, corrupt behavior, or other actions that threaten the security or territorial integrity of BIH. I'm going to do that until the day I leave. That's my job.
What do you think is the biggest threat to Bosnian security's sovereignty, territorial integrity at this moment?
Look, I think it's pretty clear that Mr. Dodik's secessionist actions and rhetoric are the most dangerous and most immediate threat to the territorial integrity, multi-ethnic character, and sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina.
And this strange relationship that you have with him will not change until something changes on his side.
Well, you know, I'm going to push back a little about the notion that there's a relationship between me and Mr. Dodik.
It has been very public, back and forth.
Well,
we've seen it.
You know, I think maybe on Mr. Dodik's part. If you look, my job is to present U.S. views and U.S. policy. So when we speak as an embassy, or when I give a speech, or when I do an interview like I'm doing now, I'm talking to you about what U.S. policy is, right? I'm not insulting anybody. I'm not calling them names. I'm not engaging in childish taunts, which is what a lot of the politicians here do, including Mr. Dodik. I'm indicating to you that here's the issue set. You claim X, the facts are Y. Here, we think X, here's why we think it. And that's, again, that's my job. That's what I'm going to continue to do.
I want to move forward with the interview, of course.
Sure.
Like we said, it's you coming to an end to your mandate in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I want to know something more personally about you as well.
Okay.
And I believe our viewers would like to know that too. You feel very, very drawn to this country, and you have shown this through your photography, you have shown this through how engaged you are in everything that's going on here, not just the political life, but also the social and cultural life. And you have contributed so much to this country. It's a very simple question. It sounds maybe as a platitude, but what does Bosnia and Herzegovina mean to you, and how will you feel leaving it?
Well, let me take the second question first. I'll be sad to leave Bosnia and Herzegovina, right? I worked here for the first time between 2006 and 2009. It was my first exposure to the Western Balkans and to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I loved it. I found the history and the culture fascinating. The politics is difficult, but it's still very interesting. The country is beautiful, and so I enjoyed exploring it. I enjoyed learning about it, and I find learning to be just a very intellectually fulfilling part of my job and my life. And I was thrilled when I was asked to come back as ambassador. And so, you know, to me, having a second opportunity to do all these things, now I am into photography, and I'm better at it than I was when I first bought my point and shoot, so I've been able to do more of it, and I enjoyed that. But I've been able to dig deeper, to learn more. As an ambassador, you get to engage with more people, and I've enjoyed doing that. And I want to make another observation about Bosnia and Herzegovina I think is really important. I really am impressed with the talent among the general public in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And they're very smart, they're very entrepreneurial, they're very friendly and opening. I've had nothing but positive experiences across the country engaging with the citizens of this country. And you see them succeeding all over the world. They're successful wherever they go, which tells me just how tremendous BIH could be if the politicians would unleash that talent, get out of the way, strengthen the country's democracy, improve the prospects for entrepreneurs to make investments and to grow their companies, take some steps towards reconciliation. All those things would help. And if they don't do that, people will leave this country.
They are leaving.
That's yes, in large numbers, and that's a threat to the future of the country. So I hope that the work that I have done here on behalf of the United States to advance American policy objectives here, I won't repeat them again because I've done it 5 times already, has had a positive impact. That's what I want to do. I'll be sad when I leave Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I'll never really leave
You'll
Bosnia.
never leave.
I'll never really leave.
No one really
Bosnia.
ever leaves.
No, it'll still be in my heart, and I'll still be following it from afar, and I'll still find a way to be engaged in some way. I'm
sure you'll do that. I want to talk about the younger generations in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the generations, educated generations that are leaving. There are challenges, but there also, there is a hope for the future. There are a lot of young people that stay here. There are a lot of people that were already abroad and they are coming back to the country. But how do you see them reshaping the country's structures, and what do they need in order to succeed?
Well, the youth of Bosnia and Herzegovina face tremendous challenges. We talked about some of them. Ethno-nationalism is on the rise. It's worse today than it was when I was here between 2006 and 2009. Economic opportunities are limited and constrained. Worse, a lot of those opportunities that exist are not based on talent or merit, but based on political patronage networks that require you to pledge loyalty to some party leader in order to get a job or an opportunity. Corruption is rampant in BIH, whether that's the health sector, the education sector, or across all levels of government. And I can understand why young people look at that and they say, I don't know if I can make a future for myself here. I need to go elsewhere. But I do think it's possible to change things. At heart, I'm an optimist. And there are things I think young people can do to do that. The first thing I think they can do is reject all of the political and economic negatives that we see in Bosnian and Herzegovinian society, right? They can live their lives according to the values that are enshrined in Euro-Atlantic institutions, right? That's important. Every little corner that we make better is a positive, and we all have that within our own control. The second thing they can do is fight for change, right? And I'll give you a couple examples of where that might be possible. It's clear that we need greater election integrity in this country, right? And we've seen leaders steal elections and stuff ballot boxes. The Central Election Commission is pushing to make changes to the way elections are administered, to roll out technologies like biometric identification, like ballot scanners, across the entire country in 2026, at every polling station. That way, every ballot is counted as cast. No more stealing around in the night. That's exactly right. And people should support that. They should press their parliamentarians. They should press their local politicians to make sure that gets done. Well, I'm giving suggestions, right? I'm telling you asked me how they can change things.
That is all clear, but how to inspire people to do that, to take accountability as well for the future of not just their own, but of their own children as well.
Let me give you another example, which I hope will illustrate the point.
I mean, you speak to young people often, right?
Of course.
What do they tell you out of their own experience?
Let me give you this example first, because I think it's important, because you asked the question about how to inspire people. Economic opportunities. You need to create economic opportunities here, which requires reform. It also requires dealing with corruption. And we work with a group called the Cardboard Revolution. They're based in Tuzla, and they went after the illegal logging in Tuzla. They led a campaign, and over a couple years, they changed it. Right? Now, I'm not telling you civic activism or changing or taking on entrenched authorities is easy. It took them a few years, but they did it. There's young people who got together to try to affect change in their community, and I think that's really important. I think the other area where I think it's particularly important for young people to engage is reconciliation. Right? The leaders of this country have failed the youth of this country because they've been unwilling to step outside their own communities and demonstrate any empathy for the civilian victims of the most recent, but other conflicts as well. It's going to be up to the young people to make that change, because the politicians don't seem to be willing to do that. And that's another place where they can be active. As to what young people tell me, they tell me what you would expect. They want to trust their political system. They want economic opportunity. They want a place where they'll feel secure that they can build lives for themselves and their children, and they all hope someday, grandchildren. And I think that's a perfectly normal aspiration, and it's one, obviously, the United States in the various programs that we're implementing here seek to help them achieve.
Sounds like a basic human right.
Yes.
Pretty much. Basic human right. What do you think, how long will take to get to that point? You've seen the country, you've met the people, you have back and forth, of course, like we said, with political leaders. Not you, of course, there are certain tantrums that have been thrown in the past couple of years. How long will it's going to take before my generation takes over and says, okay, now we're going to do it our way?
Well, look, I can't.
Aren't we influenced?
I can't predict the future, right? Obviously, I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now. I think, though, there are tremendous opportunities in front of the country. Whether it's the decisions taken at the Madrid summit at NATO to help build a closer and deeper partnership between the alliance and Bosnia-Herzegovina, or the decisions taken by the European Union to grant the country candidacy status and then grant it conditional opening of accession negotiations. Those are real opportunities. That presents the possibility of meaningful change. But political leaders have to take advantage of that. And some political leaders want to take advantage of that. Some political leaders want to build a better Bosnia for everyone. But you have other political leaders who want to rip up the Dayton Peace Agreement, who are interested in pulling the country apart, or interested in taking money from government coffers or from businesses and enriching themselves and not their constituents. As long as that behavior continues, as I said earlier, there's going to be a place for the international community here and the OHR and its bond powers. And in addition, as long as it continues, there won't be progress. That's what needs to change.
That's what needs to change. It's going to take some time.
And look,
I guess it's going to take time.
You live in a democracy. People have a voice. I know we talked about the flaws of that democracy, and they're real. I'm not discounting them or dismissing them. But I also talked about how organizations like Cardboard Revolution made change. And there have been changes in the Federation, to use another example, with regards to small hydroelectric power plants, where communities got together and said, wait a second, no, 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 no. We don't want this. It's illegal, it's enriching people, it's destroying our natural heritage.
That was very inspiring to
yes,
see
it was inspiring, right?
And it pulls everyone to see, wow, we can really do that. We did that. That was very inspiring. It's one of those things where we say, okay, well, yes, we are a democracy. We get to say what we feel.
This is why I don't think people should feel hopeless. This is why I'm an optimist. And it goes back to what I said I saw in the people of this country. They're good people. They deserve better than what their leaders are giving them. But they have the talents and the skills and the resilience to make this country a better place.
And we see also companies that thrive in Bosnia and Herzegovina as well, which is also very inspiring. I want to go back to your photography.
Okay.
Photographic Memories exhibition, and it reflected your personal experience in Bosnia and Herzegovina. What message did you hope, or do you still hope that the visitors of your eye will take away from it?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they come away from it appreciating what tremendous natural beauty and rich cultural and historical heritage exists in Bosnia and Herzegovina. You know,
we are quite beautiful.
Yes,
we like
you
to brag
are.
About that.
Hajdučka Vrata has been there for thousands of years. Bosniaks, Serbs, Croats have passed beneath it, but as have so many others. The beauty of the old bridge in Konjic, or the dome of the Franciscan monastery in Fojnica, or Gračanica monastery in Trebinje, that beauty is not contingent upon the ethnicity of the viewer. It's beautiful to all of us. It's universal. And so my hope is that people appreciate all of these things as their own. They don't belong to politicians. They belong to the citizens of this country, to Serbs, Bosniaks, Croats, others, however they identify. Hajdučka Vrata belongs to you. The monasteries, the castles, the cultural sites, they're yours. And you should treasure and take care of them. And you should insist that your politicians do the same.
To take care of them, of course. And there's this one thing about Bosnians. When we are in the country, we have so many bad things to say about it, but when we are traveling abroad and then we brag about our beauty, we like to show what we have. I do that personally as well, a lot. So I do understand that. I am very proud Bosnian, and I'm very proud of what we have. And you're right, it's all ours. It's our heritage. It's our culture, regardless of the ethnicity, of course.
Yeah, can I make one more point about that? Because
yes,
I think,
absolutely.
Because you said something that sparked a thought. It's a shared history and culture, right? Bosnia and Herzegovina has been a multi-ethnic space for centuries. It's had different borders, different rulers, fine, right? But it's never been a mono-ethnic space. You cannot pull apart the various threads of the country. It's destructive, and why would you want to?
Exactly.
Right? It's an enriching, and it's a positive, and it's a strength of this country. It's something to be cherished, not destroyed.
With one exception, now it sparked another thought.
Okay.
I think this interview is going to be longer than what we have anticipated. The old bridge in Mostar. It's one of the examples where ethno-nationality played a role, unfortunately. It is a shared heritage that we have, but what happened to the old bridge in Mostar is it's a travesty. It's so sad. And even today, 30 years after the war, almost 30 years, 3 decades after the war, the city is still pretty much divided. You know, there are still divisions across Bosnia where that heritage is not really taken, you know, its role as it should. But Old Bridge in Mostar is well known all around the world, and no one says then, oh, it's Croat, it's Bosniak, it's Serb. Everyone says it's Bosnian, it's
Correct.
a Bosnian heritage, and that's something that we should also be proud of and make sure that it stays like that.
Well, there was a tremendous amount of deliberate destruction of cultural and historic sites during the 1992 to 1995 war. The Old Bridge is an example of it, but it's the most prominent, but of course not the only one. That's why these issues are addressed in the Dayton Peace Agreement. Right?
Yes.
And I think it's why the High Representative is correct to raise concerns about the failures of certain political parties to protect the country's cultural institutions, but also to ensure that the Monuments Commission is working the way it's supposed to. And we supported the High Representative's decision to use his bond powers to address the issues associated with the library, and we would support the High Representative's use of his bond powers, if it comes to that, to resolve the issues associated with the remaining cultural institutions, but also those with the National Monuments Commission.
Absolutely, we need to take care of that.
Yes.
We need to take care of that. We have 5 more minutes left. I have so many questions, so little time. All right, so in particular memory, personal place in Bosnia and Herzegovina that has left a profound impact on you and would hold a special place in your heart. Is there such a person? Is there such a place? Is there such a memory that you can just
I have lots
pick out of your...
lots of wonderful memories of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I can share a few. Let me start with the people. I mentioned earlier how warmly I have been received and treated by the citizens of this country wherever I've traveled. I can remember a time when I was traveling in rural Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I decided to stop because there was good light and there was a particular structure, an old building I wanted to photograph in this lovely setting, and so we stopped, and I did my photography thing. And we were quite close, right across the road actually from a home, and there was a man outside sort of watching us.
You're going like a basic tourist.
Yeah, kind of wondering what is this guy doing, right? And so I went up to chat with him, and I asked about the building, and he told me the story. It was a great story about how his grandfather was involved in helping construct the building, and it had been a school at one point. It was in a state of disrepair. And after some conversation, he said, let's have some rakia. I said, sure, why not? Right? So we sat down in his garden and we had a drink, and he then gave me a bottle of his homemade rakia. So the next time I was in the area, a few months later, I brought him a bottle of American bourbon. So he could have, it's not my rakia, I didn't make it, but it's a good American spirit. And later on, I had an opportunity to meet his whole family at whether Slava, his 2 daughters. And I really will treasure that. And I think it's exemplary of the kind of experience I've had. I've been to some lovely places. I did watch sunrise at Hajdučka Vrata, which is pretty stunning.
Right.
It was hard to get there, but it was pretty stunning. And I really have a deep love for history, and I've done a lot of studying of your history. Sometimes I get it wrong, but I try really hard to get it right. And I hesitate to pick favorite places, but I've loved visiting your old medieval castles, which are a real treasure. And I have a few that I like most, I guess. Vranduk might be my favorite. Srebrenik, which really ought to be a set for Game of Thrones. That's incredible. And Bielaj, which is in Bosanski Petrovac, which is also lovely. So, but I could go on. There's plenty of places, and I have plenty of fond memories.
That's a castle. And last question, of course, dedicating your time, your energy here. What do you want your legacy? Like I said, you are one of the most vocal ambassadors in Bosnia and Herzegovina, not just U.S. ambassadors at whole. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered by when you leave?
Well, I'm a little reluctant to discuss my legacy because I haven't left yet. And I still have a lot of work to do. And as I said earlier, I'm going to keep doing my job right up to the moment I get on the plane before I go back to Washington, D.C. But, having said that, I came to Bosnia and Herzegovina charged with implementing America's foreign policy here. You know, support for the territorial integrity, sovereignty, and multi-ethnic character of BIH, and helping advance it down the path of Euro-Atlantic integration. And I've tried to do that to the best of my ability. And I have also tried to ensure that the United States responds clearly and swiftly to hold those accountable who are engaged in anti-Dayton actions, corruption, or other steps that have been that threaten the security or territorial integrity of the country. There are lots of other issues that I've worked on that are special. I care a lot about reconciliation. I think it's important. I think we need to honor all the civilian victims of the conflicts that have occurred, the wars that have occurred in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I mean, one of the very first things I did was visit Kasani pits to pay respect to the victims of the criminal actions that occurred there. Grabovica as well, and Donja Gradina too. I do that every year. I don't like it, and I think it's wrong to see politicians politicize these issues, to spread disinformation about it. To heal, you need to acknowledge, and you need to respect and honor the victims and memorialize them. And I've argued quite forcefully, as you might put it, in public about the importance of that, and I'm glad that I did it. The last thing I'll mention is the importance of integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions. And part of the work that we're doing, like supporting economic reforms in the tourism sector or in the IT sector, two of your fastest growing sectors in the BIH economy, steps to combat corruption, or to strengthen state-level institutions, because you need strong state-level institutions to lead you into the European Union. We've done a lot of work there. We have been particularly strong partners of the armed forces of BIH, and we've invested $50 million during my time here. But we're not done yet. We still have more work. We still have more work to do. So maybe we can talk more about my legacy after we're done working here. But I'm not done working here.
You're not done yet?
Nope.
But I do have one more question.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, I'll try to be really concise. What is next for you when you are done? When you said, when I'm on that plane, when I'm back in Washington, D.C., what is next for you?
Well, I'm going to go back to Washington, D.C., and my plan is to retire.
Retire?
Yes, that's been my plan for some time now. I promised my wife that at a certain point and at a certain age, I would retire and spend more quality time with her, and that's what I intend to do. But I'm not yet prepared to say I'll never do anything else after I retire.
I doubt you will retire completely.
That's right.
With the energy you have.
I'm going to be interested in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and I'd welcome the opportunity to continue to play a role. But I can't predict the future, I said early in the interview, so I'm not going to try to predict my future yet either.
Come and have some coffee and some rakia. Our doors are always open.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for your time, Mr. Ambassador.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Bio je to američki ambasador u Bosni i Hercegovini, gospodin Michael Murphy. Ja sam Ika Ferrer-Gotić. Hvala za pažnju.